Off the coast of Italy near Venice sits a quiet island, Poveglia. This small, unassuming piece of land has a history that is anything but quiet. For centuries it has been a place of mystery, fear, and legend. The island's story is woven with threads of tragedy and darkness, making it one of the most haunted places in the world. As we delve into its past, you'll discover why Poveglia is shrouded in an eerie aura that continues to captivate and terrify those who hear its name. Even saying the name makes people shiver. Poveglia's reputation precedes it, and for good reason. The island has been the site of countless horrors, from plague victims to mental asylum patients. Each layer of its history adds to the chilling atmosphere that surrounds it. Imagine walking through the dense, overgrown forests, feeling the weight of the island's past pressing down on you. The air is thick with the whispers of those who suffered here, their stories etched into the very fabric of the island. It's called the Island of the Dead. This name is not just a moniker, it is a testament to the countless lives lost here. During the bubonic plague, Poveglia was used as a quarantine station. Thousands of infected individuals were sent here to die, their bodies burned in mass graves. The island became a dumping ground for the dead, a place where the living dared not tread. The echoes of their suffering still linger, a haunting reminder of the island's grim past. Poveglia's history is full of sadness, sickness, and scary stories. After the plague, the island's dark history continued. In the 1920s, a mental asylum was established on Poveglia. The patients were subjected to inhumane treatments and experiments, further adding to the island's sinister reputation. The asylum's head doctor, driven mad by the island's dark energy, is said to have thrown himself from the bell tower. His ghost is one of many that are believed to haunt Poveglia to this day. It used to be a peaceful place. Before the plague and the asylum, Poveglia was a thriving community. People lived, worked, and played on the island, unaware of the darkness that would soon envelop it. The island's beauty and tranquility were a stark contrast to the horrors that would later unfold. Today, the remnants of this peaceful past can still be seen, a poignant reminder of what once was. Now, it's a reminder of dark times. The island's once vibrant community is long gone, replaced by crumbling ruins and overgrown vegetation. The buildings that remain are a testament to the island's dark history, their walls echoing with the cries of those who suffered within them. The atmosphere is heavy with a sense of loss and despair, a stark contrast to the island's former glory. This isn't just a spooky house. The structures on Poveglia are more than just abandoned buildings. They are monuments to the island's tragic past. Each one has its own story to tell, a piece of the larger narrative that makes up Poveglia's haunted history. From the asylum to the plague pits, every corner of the island is steeped in darkness. The eerie silence that pervades the island is a stark reminder of the countless lives lost here. It's not just a graveyard, it's Poveglia. The island is a massive, unmarked grave, a final resting place for thousands of souls. The gravestones that dot the landscape are a somber reminder of the island's past, each one marking the spot where a life was lost. The island's history is written in these stones, a testament to the countless lives that were cut short by disease and despair. People say it's a place where our world and the ghost world are close together. The veil between the living and the dead is thin on Poveglia, and many believe that the spirits of those who died here still roam the island. The fog that often blankets the island adds to its eerie atmosphere, creating an otherworldly landscape that feels like it exists in a different realm. Visitors have reported seeing ghostly apparitions and hearing disembodied voices, further cementing Poveglia's reputation as one of the most haunted places in the world. They say you can hear the sad voices of ghosts. The wind that whistles through the trees carries with it the mournful cries of the island's lost souls. The sounds of footsteps, whispers, and distant screams can be heard echoing through the night, a chilling reminder of the island's dark past. These ghostly sounds are a testament to the island's haunted history, a reminder that the spirits of Poveglia are never far away. Get ready. We're going to explore Poveglia and learn why it's called one of the most haunted places in the world. As we journey through its dark history, we'll uncover the stories of those who lived and died here, and discover why Poveglia continues to captivate and terrify those who dare to visit. Join us as we delve into the mysteries of the island shrouded in darkness. Poveglia was once a safe place in the waters near Venice. A long time ago in the 7th century, people went there to get away from trouble. They built a town, grew food, and fished. They lived peacefully, away from the problems of the world. Imagine a place with fresh air, sparkling water and happy sounds. That was Poveglia for a long time. They didn't know the scary things that were coming. Their peaceful life was going to change. The peace of Poveglia didn't last. This serene island, once a haven of tranquility, was about to face a transformation so ghastly that it would be remembered for centuries. The island's calm waters and gentle breezes belied the storm that was about to hit. Poveglia, with its lush greenery and picturesque views, was a place where people came to escape the chaos of the mainland. But this peace was not to endure. The island's fate took a dark turn, one that would forever change its history and the lives of those who lived there. A terrible sickness, the Black Death, spread across Europe. This plague, also known as the bubonic plague, was one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. It swept through cities and towns, leaving a trail of death and despair in its wake. The disease did not discriminate, it affected the rich and the poor, the young and the old. Entire families were wiped out, and communities were left in ruins. The Black Death's reach was vast, and its impact was devastating. It was only a matter of time before it reached the shores of Poveglia. It came to Poveglia too. The island, once a refuge, became a place of fear and suffering. The first signs of the plague were subtle, but it quickly spread, infecting many. The once bustling island community was now gripped by panic. People tried to flee, but the disease was relentless. The island's isolation, which had once been its greatest strength, now became its greatest weakness. There was no escape from the Black Death. The Black Death was one of the worst sicknesses ever. It caused fever, chills, and painful swellings. The infected suffered greatly and many died within days. The island's once clear skies were now overshadowed by dark, ominous clouds, reflecting the despair that had taken hold. The air was thick with the stench of death, and the cries of the suffering echoed through the island. Poveglia was no longer a place of peace. It had become a living nightmare. It changed Poveglia into a scary place. The once thriving community was now a ghost town. Buildings were abandoned and nature began to reclaim the land. Overgrown vegetation covered the once manicured gardens, and the structures that had once been homes and businesses now stood in ruins. The island's beauty had been replaced by an eerie, haunting atmosphere. Poveglia had become a place of desolation and decay. People who were sick were sent there to be kept away from others. The island became a quarantine zone, a place where the infected were isolated in a desperate attempt to contain the spread of the disease. Boats carrying the sick and dying arrived daily, and the island's population swelled with those who had been cast out from the mainland. The quarantine area was overcrowded and under-resourced, and the conditions were dire. The sick were left to fend for themselves with little hope of recovery. Ships brought sick and dying people to Poveglia. The island became a dumping ground for the afflicted. The sight of the ships arriving, filled with the suffering and the dying, was a daily reminder of the island's grim reality. The once bustling docks were now a place of sorrow and despair. The sick were unloaded and left to their fate, with no one to care for them. The island's isolation, which had once been a source of protection, was now a prison for the doomed. They had little hope of getting better. The conditions on the island were harsh, and the chances of survival were slim. The sick were left to suffer in isolation, with no medical care and no hope of recovery. The island's once vibrant community was now a place of despair. The people who had once called Poveglia home were now prisoners of the plague, trapped in a living hell. The island's beauty had been replaced by a sense of hopelessness and dread. The island, once a safe place, became a place of death. Families were broken apart. The plague did not spare anyone, and the island's population was decimated. The once thriving community was now a shadow of its former self. The buildings that had once been filled with life were now empty and abandoned. The island's beauty had been replaced by a haunting desolation. Poveglia had become a place of sorrow and loss, a place where the dead outnumbered the living. The air smelled bad, and there was a lot of crying. The stench of death hung heavy in the air, and the cries of the suffering echoed through the island. The once clear skies were now filled with dark, ominous clouds, reflecting the despair that had taken hold. The island's beauty had been replaced by a sense of dread and hopelessness. Poveglia was no longer a place of peace. It had become a place of suffering and death. Poveglia was now a place of death. The island, once a haven of tranquility, had been transformed into a place of horror. The graveyards were filled with the bodies of the dead, and the island's beauty had been replaced by a haunting desolation. Poveglia had become a place of sorrow and loss, a place where the dead outnumbered the living. The island's history had been forever changed, and its legacy would be one of suffering and death. The Black Death made Poveglia a truly awful place. There were more dead people than living people. There were too many bodies to bury, so they dug big holes and put many bodies in them. The ground, once full of life, was now full of the dead. These huge graves are still there today. They remind us of the many people who died from the Black Death. Hundreds of years after the Black Death, Poveglia became scary again. This small island, nestled in the Venetian lagoon, had already seen its fair share of horror. During the plague, it was a quarantine station, a place where the sick and dying were sent to live out their final days. The island became a mass grave with thousands of bodies buried in its soil. But the darkness didn't end there. In the early 20th century, they built a hospital for people with mental illnesses. This hospital was supposed to be a place of healing, a sanctuary for those who were suffering, but it quickly became a place of nightmares. The hospital was isolated, cut off from the rest of the world, and the patients were left to the mercy of the staff. But it wasn't a good place. The hospital was understaffed and underfunded, and the patients were often neglected. The building itself was falling apart, with broken windows and crumbling walls. The courtyard, once a place for patients to get fresh air, was overgrown and filled with broken benches. It was a place of despair. It was a place of cruelty and sadness. The staff, overwhelmed and undertrained, resorted to harsh measures to control the patients. There were stories of beatings, of patients being locked in dark rooms for days on end. The equipment was old and rusted, and the treatments were often more harmful than helpful. The hospital was a place of suffering. People in the hospital said they heard voices. They said the island was haunted by the ghosts of those who had died during the plague. The patients would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming that they had seen shadows moving in the hallways. The staff dismissed these stories as the ravings of madmen, but the patients were convinced that the island was cursed. They said the ghosts of the people who died from the Black Death were bothering them. The patients claimed that they could hear the cries of the dead, that they could feel cold hands touching them in the dark. Some even said that they had seen the ghosts, pale and gaunt, wandering the halls of the hospital. The island's dark history seemed to be coming back to haunt it. People whispered about a mean doctor. This doctor was said to be cruel and sadistic, taking pleasure in the suffering of his patients. He performed experiments on them, using old and outdated methods that caused more pain than healing. The patients were terrified of him, and the staff turned a blind eye to his actions. The doctor became a figure of fear and hatred. They said he did terrible things to the people in the hospital. The doctor was rumored to have performed lobotomies and other gruesome procedures without anesthesia. He would lock patients in small dark rooms for days, leaving them to scream and cry in the darkness. The hospital became a place of horror, where the patients were more afraid of the doctor than of their own illnesses. They say the ghosts made him go crazy. The doctor, once a man of science, began to believe in the stories of the haunted island. He claimed that he could hear the voices of the dead, that he could see their faces in the shadows. He became paranoid and delusional, convinced that the ghosts were out to get him. The staff and patients watched as he descended into madness. The story goes that he jumped from the hospital's tall tower, and then the ghosts hurt him even more. The doctor, driven to the brink of insanity, climbed to the top of the hospital's tower and threw himself off. But even in death he found no peace. The patients claimed that they could still hear his screams, that they could see his ghost wandering the halls. The island of Poveglia remains a place of darkness and fear, a reminder of the horrors that took place there. Because of all the sad things that happened, Poveglia has many ghost stories. People who live near the island say the ghosts of the sick and the patients still live there. Fishermen say they see strange lights and hear screaming coming from the island. Some say the ground is made of ashes from burned bodies and that it has a strange power. Others say they have seen ghosts in the old buildings. Whatever is true, one thing is for sure. Poveglia is a place that people who like ghosts want to visit.